Can you imagine yourself behind bars? Your basic liberties are stripped away from you, along with your family and friends, your job, and your education. You can no longer decide where you want to go, when you want to eat, or what you want to eat. Your residence is a small concrete cell surrounded by hundreds of other inmates. Now, this may not seem like a possibility for you, a law-abiding citizen, but for many people in our country, it is a reality. Despite promises of liberty, the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. According to the Sentencing Project, there are around 2.3 million people imprisoned in the United States. In Wisconsin alone, there are around 34,000 people in jails and prisons. These numbers have been rising dramatically for the last 90 years. As can be seen in this graph, especially in the 80s when the war on drugs began, a sharp incline of more and more people have been put behind bars. It is hypocritical that a country that preaches freedom has such a large amount of people without it. By looking at this graph, we can see that the United States leads the world in prison population. The second country is China, which has a very different government structure than us, including no freedom of speech or freedom of the press. Therefore, it should be shocking to everyone that the United States imprisons more people than a country like China. Problems exist within our prisons that are unjust and should be addressed. There are also many signs that our prison systems are ineffective. The first thing I want to discuss is the major problems within the prisons themselves. Although being punished for their crimes, prisoners do not deserve to be treated inhumanely. I believe that everyone should be treated equally in the eyes of the law, but sadly this is not our reality. Black men are more likely to be arrested, convicted, and given much harsher sentences than any other group. People of color make up about 37% of the U.S. population, but they make up more than 67% of the prison population. In Wisconsin, the black to white ratio of prisoners is 11-5. You can see in this chart that the percentage of black people incarcerated per 100,000 people is much higher than Latino and much, much higher than white. Once in prison, inmates have little control over their fate. The University of South Dakota discovered that around 1 in 5 prisoners is forced into sexual contact with others. There is constant fear, and intimidation is used by both other inmates and guards. The injustices that occur within prisons are not humane punishments, even for criminals. As a result, prison does not reform or rehabilitate prisoners. Incarceration has shown to be ineffective at changing the behavior of criminals. Therefore, many of them end up reoffending and end up reincarcerated. Within 5 years, over 3/4 of prisoners are rearrested. More than half of released prisoners do not even make it through their first year without a rearrest. Looking at this graph, it shows different types of crimes and how likely they are to reoffend. Although this data is a little bit older, you can see that the percentages are fairly high no matter what type of crime it is. Another problem is that impoverished people are disproportionately affected by jail time. If you are imprisoned for more than a month or two, you are very likely to lose your job. As someone in a poor financial situation, you could lose your car, your home, or you could lose everything without monthly payments coming in from your job. Parents are taken away from their children, and sometimes the rest of the family has to feed for themselves with the loss of the main breadwinner. The poor typically commit crimes based on need, but once released from prison, if you no longer have your job, your car, or your house, how are you supposed to restart your life? This leads to a cycle of poverty and crime. There are also those who should not be imprisoned to begin with. People with addictions need help and treatment, not jail time. Despite the best efforts to control them, drugs are still in the prisons anyways. Once released, their addiction is likely to continue, which may put them back in jail. This is Curtis Wilkerson. Due to California's 3 strikes rule, he was given life in prison for stealing a pair of socks worth $2.50. Obviously, he took out of need, but due to the common problem of over-sentencing crimes, he was given life in prison for this. On another note, the Innocence Project has estimated that between 2 and 5% of all prisoners are falsely convicted and are actually innocent. Now that we have acknowledged the dysfunction of our prison system, I will recommend some of the changes that could be made. Making the necessary changes could not be easy, but the benefit to the country will be huge. To quote Bernie Sanders, "For people who have committed crimes that have landed them in jail, there needs to be a path back from prison. The federal system of parole needs to be reinstated. We need real education and real skills training for the incarcerated. Allowing prisoners to work, or at least gain skills necessary for work, will allow them to adjust back to society much more easily. They won't resort back to theft or criminal activity to support themselves if they have the ability to get a job right away. This will add more workers to the economy, and we will spend less money on supporting the prisoners once they go back to jail. Reducing the length of sentences would also help cut spending on prisoners while having the same impact on their life. It has been shown that a shorter stay in prison is often as influential as a longer one on the inmate. There are also many cases where there's over-sentencing, such as in the case of Curtis Wilkerson. To prevent released prisoners from reoffending, they will need support after their release. We should help them readjust to society. Through support groups and programs to check up on them after their release, criminals can transform their lives. I believe that actions should have consequences. However, our prison systems aren't working. Due to the mistreatment of prisoners and the lack of changes being made to their behavior, I think we need to reform our judicial punishment system. To quote Barack Obama, "We believe that when people make mistakes, they deserve the opportunity to remake their lives." Thank you.